Good evening all and welcome. Tonight's video is the reverse of what won in the poll, as it was opposite day. Well, I said it was. Is there an actual opposite day? In any case, cryptids are in, so get ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This is my first time sharing any experience online that happened to myself or anyone else. It was early summer of 2010, which I only remember because my 21st birthday had just passed and I was finally legal to hit the bars. It was a Friday night, and I was up having a drink at a bar that my cousin David was the bartender at. It was a small town bar that outside any events like a band or other entertainment being there, it usually just stayed pretty quiet. It was very early in the evening, and I had just gotten out of work for the night, working at a McDonald's in another small town, less than 10 miles from the one in which I lived. I was only on my second drink of the evening when my phone rang. On the other line was a friend of mine from my childhood, James. He was calling asking if I wanted to come over to his brother's house and join them for a night of poker, beer and weed. Sounded like a good time in my book, and since I was literally only on my first sip in my second gin and tonic, I agreed to make the drive into Toledo. Most people know where Toledo is, but for those of you who don't, it's a city in the northwest region of Ohio, about an hour south from Detroit. It was about a 20-minute drive from my small town, and I figured it would be a good time. I stopped at home to grab some cash. I only ever took about $10 to $20 with me, just to make sure I didn't get too caught up having a good time. I left the house at 11:05, and remember this distinctly because I had called James to tell him I was on my way, and they were going to wait for me to start the poker game at 11:30. We always played a tournament style of poker game, where we put all our money in at once and got equal amount of chips, and played until there was only one person left with any chips, who then got to keep all of the money. I took my usual route over to his brother Eddie's house, as I have done many times before. We had all gotten together, a group anywhere between 4 to 6 of us, and would play poker in Eddie's basement at least twice a month. I had gotten into the corner of Oakdale Street in East Broadway, and I was sitting at a red light in an area that's nothing but residential housing outside of the elementary school that sat at that exact corner. I'm sitting up looking at the red light, waiting for it to change, which always seemed to take forever coming from this direction, when I noticed something in the sky that from my vantage point was partially hidden directly behind the red light. It was a very bright white light that seemed to be pointing straight down, almost like it was a helicopter using a spotlight to identify something, but much, much brighter at the point of origin. I heard absolutely nothing after rolling my windows down, and knew this could not possibly be a helicopter, or I'd absolutely be able to hear it. Wanting a better view, I pulled into the parking lot of an ice cream shop that sat directly across the road from the school. I was nearby it and got out my car to try and figure out what this thing was. When I got out of the car, I stared up into the sky and immediately found it again. It couldn't have been a plane. It didn't have the right shape. It was more oval than anything, but it was definitely an oval shape. I almost thought perhaps it was a blimp given the shape, but it seemed far too large to be a blimp, even by the measurements of some. Everyone knows, like the Goodyear blimp. Plus it had no decals or identifying marks, either silver or greyish. After what felt like looking at it for 30 seconds or so, my eyes started to burn. Not burn like in the sense of extreme burning, but it was almost like flies were coming into my eyes and making them water up. I closed my eyes and rubbed them. They were closed, and all I see was black. And after getting my eyes to stop bothering me, I tried to look up again to find it, but it's gone. I looked all around but couldn't see it anymore. This, you see, is a very densely populated neighborhood with houses, trees, and they're able to obscure things from view if you look up into the sky. And after a little than a minute, I decided that I should probably go and play poker. I get over to Eddie's house, which is about 4 blocks from where this had taken place, and knock on the basement door. A few moments go by, and no one answers. I go to the front door and knock. I figured maybe, since I'm 5 to 10 minutes late, maybe they were upstairs playing on the PS3. I knock, but there's no answer. Finally, I start knocking very loudly on the door, almost pounding, and Eddie finally answers the door saying, "Man, why the hell are you this late, knocking on my door at night?" I looked at him, confused. "Well, your brother said I could come over and play cards with you guys." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity and responds, "Yeah, I know he did. He called you like 6 hours ago. It's 4:30 in the morning. How late did you think we would be playing to?" This scared me quite a bit, as from what I had remembered, at this moment it could not possibly have been any later than 11:25 to 11:30 at most. I attempted to play it off and say, "Damn man, must have lost track of time. Can I use your bathroom before I head back?" He agrees and tells me I should splash some water on my face, as I look like I'm either drunk or haven't slept in a week. I walk into his bathroom and my eyes are absolutely bloodshot. It almost looks like I have 2 black eyes. To this day, I have absolutely no idea what happened to me that night. I have no explanation for the lost hours worth of time, how I could not have possibly noticed that much time being passed, or how on earth something that felt like my eyes were being irritated by a mosquito or something similar falling into my eyes. I don't want to pretend to know what it was and explain it, or even assume that whatever it was I saw that evening had anything to do with it, but it has creeped me out ever since. I was driving home one night under a new moon February sky, not a single cloud, and the Milky Way was gorgeous. I had been driving for a while, as it was an 1.5 hour trip, when I noticed something odd in the sky. A void, something blocking the stars. This was odd because 1, it was in the opposite direction of the moon's position. 2, it was large, and big enough that I could see its triangular outline. 2 long sides, 1 shorter. At first, I dismissed it as a cloud, nothing abnormal, but its outline was 3 straight lines, not natural. Once I realized this, I kinda got nervous. As I kept driving, I estimated it to be under 1 kilometer off the ground and hovering in place, and I was starting to get closer to it, with the road I was on seeming to pass underneath it. With my brain going into full X-Files mode, I started to feel jittery, as my brain was trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Before I got underneath it, despite my brain telling me to get away, I pulled over and got out to see it better. This was in 2005, before I had a cell phone. So I stood there in the dark in the middle of nowhere, staring at a big wedge in the sky. No wind, no noise, just calm and quiet. And after about a minute of standing there, it seemed to start moving, almost spinning in place, the long front moving around towards where I was standing. I started to panic a bit, realizing that I might have really messed up when the UFO lit up several lights under it, and they began pulsing, almost like the blinkers at a crosswalk. The lights flashed in yellow, blue, green, then instantaneously there was a muffled whomp, and it was gone. The obscured stars were now visible, and a slight breeze kicked up. Needless to say, I got back in my car, drove like crazy to get home, and had a double shot of whiskey and was up all night. I've replayed this in my head and analysed every possible explanation, but there is only one, and I'll go to my grave knowing that aliens exist. I am a healthcare professional working at a small hospital in a rural area of the Midwest in the USA. It's not unusual for me to see 6 to 8 patients a day. Occasionally, you run into a patient who you really hit it off with, where it seems as if you've known each other for years. That's how my story starts. At my hospital, we have what is called the Joint Program for patients who are having elective hip or knee replacements done. I was scheduled to see this lady, Doris, for the last time before she discharged home, later that same date. As I've said, Doris and I really hit it off. In the process of helping her prepare to head home, I asked her what made her finally decide to get her knee replacement done. She explained that she had been to her doctor many times for knee pain, and she finally decided to follow his suggestion. After that, they found what she described as little beads around her knee in her x-ray, likely bone cartilage. I teased her by saying, "Oh, the aliens just put them in there." Doris didn't miss a beat. She told me that she wanted to show me something and asked me to grab her iPad for her. After doing so, she pulls up pictures of some of her cattle. Her and her husband are cattle ranchers in the area, and there are tons of cattle ranches in a 50-mile radius where I live that have been mutilated in the very same way you see on the alien TV shows, documentaries, and so on. I'm talking patches of skin taken out in perfect circles around the eyes, missing tongue, desiccated insides with perfect hide, missing rectum/udders, no blood, all of that. I was honestly too shocked to speak much at first. I asked Doris who or what she thought was doing it. She stated she had absolutely no idea, but that she was sure it wasn't the government because they could easily come to any cattle auction and buy cattle, and no one would ever be any of the wiser. She said she thought it was an intimidation tactic to leave the cattle behind, like that had to be found the next day. She also said that it seemed like they rotate around the cattle ranches every year or so. Her ranch will go a few years unmolested while her neighbors will have problems. Also, she stated that it always seemed to occur on what she called those weird holidays, by which I guess she means equinoxes, solstices, and so on. She said that sometimes her husband will hear a loud whooshing wind sound above his head. Anyway, that's pretty much it. This happened 2 years ago now, and it's been in my mind ever since. It's creepy to think about these kind of things happening, just half hour away from where I lie my head every night. About 4 to 5 years ago one night, I was at my friend's house jamming and making music. The hours tick by and we're having so much fun. But then the clock strikes 1 a.m. My friend had to go to bed at this point. He had work in the morning, but he wanted to step outside to smoke a final cigarette and chat for a few minutes. I had the next day off. We both go outside and it's snowing very hard as we both live in North Dakota. Minutes go by having a good chat, as a bright blue light shines from the sky, creating a rectangular shape on the ground. It had 6 squares to make up the shape of the rectangle, and flashed 6 times and then was gone. My friend and I both looked at each other knowing we saw the same thing at the same time. He finishes his cigarette saying, "Don't let the aliens get to you tonight," in a joking way, and I laugh about it. He's all creeped out and says goodnight. I start to walk home. It's a very quiet, very eerie kind of calm, and I am only 7 houses down. And I start to feel very uncomfortable, like a huge wave of anxiety was washing over me. It's like something or someone was watching me. I look up at the streetlights, and they're flickering above me. And out of nowhere, that blue light shines on me, flickering, and flashes behind me 6 times. At this point, I stop, dead in my tracks. I can hear a very low subsonic noise that was vibrating, and I brush it off, continuing my walk thinking I'm just tired and need to sleep. I finally approach my house, walking up a set of stairs leading me to my deck. I take out the keys to unlock the door. The light then flashes 6 times onto the street and stays on this time. I'm staring at the light on my street and see a very tall shadow figure emerge from the blue light. It looked like it was walking towards me. Now I'm in panic mode. I'm attempting to unlock the door and it's 12 degrees outside and I can barely feel my fingers. The street lights are flickering as this creature is getting closer. I can hear the snow crushing as it approaches me. The subsonic noise is getting louder and louder, and I finally unlock my door and feel the need to take one last peek at the thing. And I see a very tall grey figure, roughly 7 feet tall with very dark black eyes. And it's just staring right at me only a few feet away. It then lunges at me, making a piercing scream. I get inside, lock my door, running to my room, setting my guitar down and sit on my bed saying to myself that this isn't real. Minutes go by trying to relax and calm myself. The blue light flashes repeatedly in my window, brightening up my room, and something urges me to look out the window. I stand up, open my curtains and the light stops flashing. It's blinding me and I can barely see. And something smacks against my window that looks like a giant hand, and I see the figure staring at me through the window. I black out, waking up the next day having a massive headache, memory loss, body pains, and my ears were ringing. Very dazed and confused, having lost track of time. Ever since then, I've been a firm believer, and I'm on the lookout for more. This happened 4 years ago, but it's something I will never forget. Back in high school, I lived in a house in the suburbs of a city near the edge of a big forest. I was a freshman, and my school organized this marathon for all first-year students. I wanted to prepare myself for the marathon, so I decided to go for a run in the forest with my older brother and a close friend. Since it was mid-autumn, we decided to go a bit early so we could be back home before it got too dark. On your way to the forest, you have to walk a long, pavemented road through a meadow. We had jogged for a good 2 hours with some breaks in between. It started getting dark, so we decided to head home. We were making our way out of the forest when I suddenly saw bright lights through the trees ahead of us. I told my brother, and he said it was probably just someone running with flashlights. But I mean, we've been there for a while, and we haven't met anyone, at least not on the road in the dense forest. My brother and friend brushed it off as nothing to worry about, but something just didn't feel right. I tried to just forget about it and move on. That's when the light started moving around. There were 2 spheres of light turning on and off and suddenly appearing at different locations. I told my brother and friend as they were walking in front of me and weren't paying attention to the blinking lights. We stood there for a moment and tried to see what the lights would do next. At this point, the lights were still a good distance away from us, but they appeared to blink closer every time they turned off. We kind of panicked because we didn't really know what they could be, so we started running towards the long road through the meadow that would lead us back to the city. The lights started getting closer, however, and every time I looked behind me while I was running, I could see the lights getting closer and closer. We finally reached the road and started running like crazy. We just wanted to get out of there. That's when one of the lights came so close to me that I literally almost passed out. I'll describe what it looked like specifically. It was a huge oval sphere, about 4 meters tall, hovering at least 2 meters off the ground, and 2 or 3 meters away from me. The light was blinding, but something about it was both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. It was almost hypnotic, and I felt drawn to the strange object. My brother pulled my arm and told me to run, so I did. We got out eventually and the lights didn't chase us any further. My brother told me it would have been best if we don't talk about this again with anyone, as he believed it could have been an evil spirit and bring bad luck to talk about it. The whole experience is something I'll never forget, as it both terrified and fascinated me. The first incident happened when I was 11 years old, in 1989. We had just moved to a very hot state from a very cold one, and it was a few weeks into the school year. My stepfather at the time was a cheap arse, so he wouldn't turn on our air conditioning, so we had our windows open at night. It being roughly 85 Fahrenheit at night, so it was very hot. I could see my windows from where my bed was. It had vertical blinds over it which were closed, but the window was open. I woke up at some point in the night, seeing light shining through the blinds and hearing a radio or some kind of chatter. I couldn't understand the words being spoken, but it sounded like people talking. I thought the neighbors were throwing a party, which is weird for a weekday around 3 a.m. So I tried to ignore it and go back to bed. Maybe an hour later, it's dark again in my room. I woke up and looked to my side and saw what everyone describes as a typical grey alien, about 3-ish feet tall with big black eyes. It was terrifying. It turned to face me as I noticed it. It looked like stop motion, how it was all slow and jerky. As it faced me, I threw my blanket over my head, tucked in all of my limbs under it and crossed my legs so that none of me was exposed and began praying. I've never been a religious person, but I didn't know what to do. I asked to every deity I was aware of, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, anything I could do to please protect me and make it go away. I remember how terrified I was, my heart pounding in my chest. It was so hot under those blankets that I could barely breathe, but I was too scared to move for what felt like hours. I didn't exactly know what time it was or how long I lay there, but I stayed there, too scared to move, praying until the sun came up and my alarm for school went off. Since that day, I've slept with my head under the covers every night until I was an adult, and even now I sometimes do. Soon after that, I was diagnosed with an incurable, yet manageable autoimmune disease. Not that they were related incidents, but I feel like it's relevant to mention. In my search for answers, I saw a psychic once, who was positive I was full of crap. She said that their appearance was related to my illness, but I'm fairly sure she didn't know what she was talking about. A few years ago I got hypnotized and EMDR done, related to these memories. Out of the hypnosis, I remembered that there were 3 of them, 1 in my room and 2 outside my window. The hypnosis also brought up a memory of a different night in the same house, where I was getting a drink in the kitchen late at night. The idea was conveyed that they were hiding under the kitchen table, and they were or are always around, watching. I don't like saying the word alien because I'm not sure what they are. They also didn't look exactly the same way they're depicted. They don't look organic or fleshy. They look very angular and sharp. 99% of the pictures that you see online are fake. At least they don't look like what I've seen. I saw one picture taken in the dark next to a car where you can see one off in the distance illuminated by flash. But that's the only time I've ever seen media of it potentially looking like what I saw. The therapist that did the hypnosis thought I had some kind of abuse, and that's where the PTSD came from. But no matter how hard she poked at the idea, it never panned out. I don't think that ever happened to me, as in it doesn't explain the other memories that happened way later when we moved out of that house and away from my stepfather, the only one who had any potential to try and hurt any of us. The hypnosis revealed a much earlier memory when I was around 7 and living in the aforementioned cold state. I remember standing in the snow in the middle of the night. It wasn't cold, but I was barefoot, and I saw a woman in a red dress. She was one of them, big head, scary eyes, and was taller than the rest, and I felt safe with her, like a friendly mum or family vibe. There were other people out in that snow too. Some were walking somewhere. I don't know if they were going very far. And there were ships in the distance. There's a specific feeling I get even now which reminds me of exactly that feeling of standing in the snow, where my body is warm but the air all around is cold and dark. Like familiar and comfortable but lonely and isolating. Like warm and cold at the same time. The second time I saw them, I was still living in a very warm southern state in a different house with a different stepdad. This one was actually amazing. I found myself waking up sitting on the floor in our kitchen across from Helen Hunt, the actor, at the time. Mad About You was pretty popular and I had a bit of a crush on her, you see. I was confused because I woke up sitting cross-legged and also Helen Hunt was smiling, sitting a foot away. "You don't really look like this, do you?" she said. "No, but I thought you would be more pleasant than you." I noticed around the corner in the other room, hiding behind a chair, there was one of the aliens. I felt that I was angry, so I asked her what her deal was, and she told me not to worry about them, that they were just jealous of people. I didn't understand what that was supposed to mean other than be dismissive. The fake Helen Hunt made me feel safe. I figured she went out of her way to look for this, and to make it more pleasant for me, so that others may show concerns for my feelings. Maybe they can't all be bad. I felt like she was protecting me from the scarier ones, but they were also present. But she seemed like she was in control. My paranoia said that they just wanted me to be convinced. And I talked with her some more, but I didn't remember any of it, other than it being a generally pleasant experience, besides how strange it was. There were other small pieces I remember, odd situations that happened around the same time. My sister waking up late one night scared because she saw a light move outside her window. I watched as there were power lines and you could see stars moving back and forth over them, using the wires as reference. I couldn't have seen the satellite, or stars or planes. They were literally dancing around. My sister and I were too scared to sleep, so I told her I'd sleep on the floor to keep her company. I asked her as an adult if she had any memories about them, but she told me she did not. Not even the light incident? There was this odd dream I had been given a task in, which was to catch a fish. Then the dream would repeat itself and give me a slightly different circumstance, like catch a fish but only with a spear this time. It would repeat several times until I would become aware of it. That would break the dream logic and I would wake up, and it happened several times. I would always wake up with the same feeling of dread that happened after, and it always felt like I was related to them. I've had dreams where I was being chased by them, where ships were searching for me with beams while I was in the building, and it's been a pretty consistent theme throughout my life. I've mentioned this in the last one before, but when I was 17 to 18 I was still living at home in the same house from before. At this point it was now the mid-90s. I wake up in bed and saw a bunch of Muppets or puppets throwing a party in my bedroom. They were mostly fuzzy and blue, I think. The light in my room was bright and happy, and I felt like this Muppet show was condensing, and told them I don't believe them and that this is fake. As soon as I said that it was fake, it felt like the air was sucked out of the room. The lighting went from happy to dark and dramatic immediately. All of the fuzzy blue Muppets peeled off their masks, revealing big, scary grey aliens. I couldn't tell you how many they were, but I felt like there was a lot of them. A big one floated out of the closet towards me. It didn't walk, it just glided, and I could tell that it was pissed. He talked, or at least I heard him, because I don't remember seeing their mouths. "We're trying to make this easier for you, but that's not going to happen now." I was terrified, just crying in bed and sobbing. The big one cradled my head and looked at me, seeing me so scared and upset, then said, "You're not ready yet." Then I woke up in bed in the morning with dry tears on my face. After that night, I haven't seen them again. I feel like I failed the test after the Muppet encounter, since they were testing my fear level or something, I don't know. But I've seen the occasional shadow person run across my house. I've had a dream about them. I've had 1 or 2 incidents where I felt like something was in my house and went around searching closets like a madman at 3 a.m. I'm not saying it was aliens. I've become comfortable with the idea that maybe I hallucinated these things, or maybe there were experimental drugs in school cafeteria lunches. Perhaps it's just vaccine side effects. Who knows? All that I know is that I saw it, and that it was real. My name is Avi. When I was 6 years old, I lived in a small town in western Washington state. The city is very close to forest area and the population is mostly backwoods country type. In the year 1998, I was living in town. A night came where something strange and unique happened. My child mind couldn't fully grasp what was happening, but neither could the adults who witnessed it. My parents, my grandparents, my uncle, who's a police officer, and all of our neighbors witnessed a large number of floating, flying green balls of light. They were around softball size, maybe a little bigger. My mother has reminisced in the night and told me about how they chased my grandmother up the street and would pace the local traffic. A family friend admitted to seeing them in the nearby highway that night. My family has a very religious background, so their thoughts were that this was sinister and evil. But my memory is different. I vividly remember the green balls connecting in lines of 5 or so and just spinning around like a baton, and then unlinking to fly freely again. They would hover just above the street, up around the street lights and just everywhere in between. My mother kept ushering my brother and I inside out of fear, but I was not afraid. This may have been because I was young and unconditioned, but the lights didn't seem dangerous to me. There must have been at least 100 of them. I have theories about them, but I've never been able to find any other encounters, so this is my newest attempt. I've even put up local flyers with my email to try and get anonymous stories. People in that area just don't like to talk about this stuff. To the credit of my religious family, they did seem to cause the lights to leave. I remember the last of the one I saw was my grandmother, who was praying and telling them to leave, then suddenly all at once they shot up into the sky and vanished forever. I have waited to see them again ever since. I'm 27 now and I'm still left wondering what they are. My main theory is extraterrestrial. My mother supplements this because she remembers seeing a large craft with spinning lights on it in the sky. And I have actually dreamt this as an adult. Please, if anyone you know or you have seen these lights or anything like it, I would find a lot of peace in knowing that my little hometown is not alone. My family have some land on a remotish mountain just outside of Eureka. I come down here a few times every year and haven't really experienced anything too out of the ordinary, but last night was different to say the least. I didn't know this before, but apparently my area is pretty popular for UFO sightings. I still don't know if that's what this was, but I'm having a really hard time coming up with a logical explanation. We had a good fire going for a few hours, and after everyone else went to bed, it was just my dad, fiancé, and I left. We were all just talking and enjoying the cozy weather and fire, when around 1 a.m. we started talking about constellations, so we'd all leaned back and were staring up at the sky. My fiancé pointed out a light that was noticeably brighter than the stars, and it was steadily moving. I immediately figured it was a satellite, but then my dad chimed in with "Oh no, I don't think it's that. Watch for a second." My dad and I are hugely into aliens, and we both have had a fair amount of sightings in the past. I focused closer on the light and saw it. It wasn't just gliding across in a straight line, it was zigzagging back and forth as it was moving east. The three of us were exclaiming about how weird it was, when it suddenly veered in an arc towards the southern mountain. I'm thinking to myself, okay, is this really happening right now? And the light just stops. It just hovers above the mountain for at least 5 minutes. At this point, we're all saying that it's definitely not a satellite, with the occasional comment like, holy shit, this is weird. The light started to shift to the right again until it was behind a tree, and we lost sight of it completely. We went back to the normal campfire shenanigans for a few minutes, and my fiancé got up to get some drinks. As soon as he got up, the entire sky lit up in an almost painful bright white flash, like lightning on steroids. This was a crystal clear night. There wasn't a storm on the radar for miles and miles. We couldn't even see one little wispy cloud. It absolutely could not have been lightning. My dad and I were the only ones who saw it, as most people were asleep and my fiancé was inside. There wasn't a single sound when it happened, no boom, no rumble, but the entire mountain went dead silent for a few minutes afterwards. It was so eerie. It's like time around us paused momentarily. My dad ended up feeling so uncomfortable and anxious after that he just went back to bed. The two of us stayed up for a while after that, but we didn't see any more weird lights nor flashes, but I definitely felt a heavy sense of unease around us for the rest of the night. This is a story that happened to me in October of 2013 in Brighton, Michigan. Ironically, this happened the night before Halloween. I was 13 and in middle school. It was late, roughly 9 p.m, and was just about completely dark, but it was a full moon. I live on a dirt road that sits right on a golf course, which is in the country club, and was closed that night. Never in my life had I experienced something like this. My sister, myself, and my grandma were all home while my parents were out for the evening. I was sitting watching TV in my living room when all of a sudden, my dog began growling in a very evil way. It was a growl I'd never heard her make before, so it drew my attention. She was staring out the window in the living room. When I walked out to look outside, I saw it. In the dirt road were 3 neon green illuminated balls about the size of softballs. They were hovering mid-air and moving slightly up and down. At first I figured it was the neighbors going for a walk, as they had glow balls of some kind, but as I looked harder, I couldn't see anybody around these illuminated balls. At that point, my concern grew even more. After watching them hover in mid-air for a few minutes, they moved forward up the road a bit, but they were still directly in the road in front of my house. All of a sudden, as I'm watching these green glowing balls, all 3 of them hover up in perfect unison. Then out of nowhere, they shoot up into the sky at a perfect 75-degree angle. After the first one shot up, the second one did as well, and the third. One right after another. The way these objects shot up into the sky was exactly as if they were put in a completely straight vacuum tube. They didn't wobble or anything, they just shot into the sky, almost like they were sucked into it. I was blown away and didn't know what to think. This couldn't be possible. There's no way it was caused by natural means, because the light from the moon lit up outside enough so that I could see if there were anyone outside doing something like this, but not a person was in sight. All my neighbors were inside for the night, and as I said, the country club was closed with no cars and nothing there. I immediately ran to grab my sister and told her everything that had just occurred. And we went to switch off every light in the house so if there was anything outside it wouldn't be able to see us. We began watching for 10 to 15 minutes when out of nowhere the 3 balls came flying out of the sky once more. After they landed, they began hovering about 10 feet in the air and were directly on the fairway of the golf course, and at this point, the fairway had been lit up. That's when I see these things hovering in the air, and there not being one person around me. As they were moving, my sister and I were watching very intently. They began approaching our house and road, but never entered the property, and once again they formed a straight line together, and one by one shot up into the sky, and after that we never saw them again. My sister and I did some research to find lots of very similar encounters, and we were very, very much believers for thinking that it might be supernatural or UFO related. Green glowing balls just don't come flying out of nowhere and then shoot up into the sky on a perfect angle. To this day, we are just unsure, and most likely will never know the true meaning of what it was that happened that night. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. We certainly had a few interesting ones indeed. If you did, be sure to let me know down below. A huge thanks as always to my wonderful, amazing, lovely, and outstanding patrons. You guys are amazing. If you want to help support the channel, feel free to check the link out. It's completely optional, but it obviously helps me out a lot. And you get some cool perks for doing so. And if you are a patron, don't forget to use your perks, because they're there to be used. Alright then guys, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's video. And for now, it's time for me to sign off. So stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.